family. All right, we're going to jump in now to our new series. This series is going to run until Christmas, and it is called A Celebration of Our Redemptive History. Now, I'm going to explain a little bit first about what redemptive history is and how it finds its fulfillment, if you will, in Jesus. How it finds its culmination in Jesus. And so this message is going to be called, or is called, the Redemptive Historical Kingship Fulfilled in Jesus Christ. Kind of a long title, but that's okay. So if you have a study guide, I want you to look at it right now, and I'm going to read for you a quote from hip-hopper, theologian, author, Pastor Timothy Brendel, a friend of mine. He wrote the book called The Unfolding, and it's a fantastic book of redemptive history. Tim says, God has designed the history of redemption in such a way that all of God's saving acts organically connect and culminate in the salvation brought about by the Lord Jesus Christ. All of the themes contained therein, and he means by that Genesis to Revelation, are ultimately tributaries leading us to the water of the river of life, Christ himself. Here's another definition by author, biblical scholar, professor of Old Testament at Westminster, Ian Duguid. Duguid, I think is the way you say his name. The Old Testament is not primarily a book about ancient history or culture, though it contains many things that are historical and that describe ancient cultures. Centrally, the Old Testament is a book about Christ, and more specifically, about his sufferings and the glories that will follow. That is, it is a book about the promise of a coming Messiah through whose sufferings God will establish his glorious eternal kingdom. What is redemptive historical interpretation of the Bible? It's that beginning from Genesis in chapter 3:15, when Adam and Eve messed up bad, God started a plan of redemption in motion. And literally from Genesis 3:15 on to the end of the book of Revelation, it's one, if you will, unfolding story of God redeeming a people and the creation. A people and the creation. And so this is most specifically captured, and I think most noticed, obviously, when we look back into the Old Testament. A lot of us don't know what to do with the Old Testament. We're like, okay, we're not under law, we're under grace now. I've read Romans, I've read Galatians. So I don't know what to do with the law. I don't know what to do with Moses. I don't know what to do with those bizarre stories in Judges. Like, what do we do with David and Goliath, for example? Do we see ourselves as David, and with our faith we can conquer the giants in our lives, the giants of debt and the giant of porn and the giant of anger that I just can't defeat, and by faith I can defeat these giants? Or is that more of a story about the greater son of David, who already defeated the greatest giant, sin, Satan, and death in our place? I would argue it's a story about the second, not so much about the first. What we tend to do with Old Testament stories is we stick ourselves in as the heroes. So Cain and Abel. Never would we put ourselves as Cain, the murderer. Meanwhile, Romans chapter 3 would say, hey, there's no one who does good, not even one. The poison of vipers is under their lips. No one seeks after God. No one does good, not even one. Ephesians 2 says, you were dead in your trespasses and sins, following the prince of the power of the air, the spirit who's now at work in the sons of disobedience. We all lived among them at one time. But God, rich in mercy. And you see, we tend to put ourselves in as the heroes in the Old Testament. But meanwhile, we're probably more like the villains. And the hero most often points clearly to Jesus if you have eyes to see. So that's what we're going to do a little bit of right now, and we're going to look at this lens through the kingship. Okay, there's this line that starts with rulership with Adam and Eve, and I'm going to show you this in a second, and then it flows into the first actual established king that God promised, and then a failure upon failure upon failure of kings, and then the king. Okay? There's the sermon in summary, but let's flush it out. All right, number one, Genesis 1, 26 to 28 is the foundational verse for this idea of rulership and authority. And guess who it was given to? Our very first parents. So though God is the ruler, he is the king, if you will, of all that he's made, he decides that he will rule through lesser rulers. He will govern through governors. He will have dominion through us taking dominion. This is how God sets up the world to work. We read it right here in Genesis 1, 26 to 28. Then God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion, rulership. Let them take charge and rule over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the heavens, over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." So there it is. 126, God made Adam and Eve to have this rulership, this dominion, this, if you will, stewardship of creation, and to make it flourish, to cultivate it. 27, so God created man in his own image. So in this sense, God is the ruler. We reflect him when we rule well. And this is what Adam and Eve were to do. Now the image of God is a huge category, and we can flush it out for a series of sermons. But for our purposes right now, when humans take dominion, so listen, when you take control of your room, your car, your yard, when you take dominion, you are reflecting God as a ruler and a one who brings order out of chaos, because that's what just happened before this in chapter 1. God took the chaos of the void, if you will, and he brought order out of it, and he brought habitable beauty out of it. And then God says to us, now you take what I've made and you make beautiful things out of it, and you make greater things out of what I've made. And so humans have done this thing. They've taken sand that is in abundance on the beach, and they've made this thing called silicone out of it, by which all of your high-tech electronics couldn't work without, at least at this point. Who would have known that the sand on the beach, who's been there from Genesis 1, let there be land out of dry land out of the sea, that iPhones would be, stashed in the sand, all like that. This is what we do. We have dominion because God made us to take dominion. All right, so let's go to 28. And God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it." Subdue it. This is have dominion. This is rulership language. You subdue it. So if your yard's out of control, there's weeds everywhere, and you got, random trees, and you got dead, vegetation all over the place. If you were to subdue your yard, you would make it look more like Phipps than a jungle, than an unkept jungle. Okay? This is what subduing means. You take ownership and rulership of it, and this is what God made Adam and Eve to do. Do you see it? Okay, good. And they are to have children, and they're to fill the earth with image bearers who will all together take dominion and have subdueness about them. And have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the heavens, and over every living thing that moves on the earth. And God said, "Behold, I have given you," so God is giving over what he's made to them, "I have given you every plant yielding seed that is on the face of the earth, and every tree with seed in its fruit. You shall have them for food. And to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the heavens, and to everything that creeps on the earth, everything that has the breath of life, I have given every green plant for food." And it was so. So there we have the mandate of God, what's sometimes called the cultural mandate. This is fleshed out more in Genesis 2, that we are to take dominion and we are to subdue the creation on behalf of God, representing him, imaging him. Well, what happens? Well, you know the story, don't you? One of the creation that they're supposed to have dominion over ends up taking dominion over them. So a serpent comes along, to which is one of the beasts that they are to rule over in a loving and kind way, and yet they let it rule over them, and creation order is reversed. This is what Satan always loves to do. He loves to reverse the order of God and mess up the order of God. And if he can accomplish that, it causes chaos and pain and suffering. It always does every time, no matter what. And so what happens here is Satan comes in the form of a serpent and he tempts Eve to believe his words versus God's words. You trust me. God has some kind of good that he's hiding from you, and I want to give it to you. God knows that in the day you eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, you won't surely die. No, you'll be like him, knowing good and evil. And Eve saw the tree, saw the fruit, that it was good for food. She took it, ate, gave some to her husband who was with her, and he also ate. And what happened? Shame, fear, guilt floods upon them. They realize they're naked. They run, they hide. And they sew fig leaves together to try to cover up their bodies, their shame. And so, if we could summarize, Eve and Adam failed to take dominion and to subdue, and rather, they were dominated and subdued by creation. And by this, trusting in Satan's word and not trusting in God's word, they, in a sense, gave this dominion over to Satan. And this is what we find in the New Testament. Following the prince of the power of the air, Ephesians 2. The Spirit who is now at work, where? In the sons of disobedience. Who are they? We all lived among them at one time, gratifying our flesh and the natural cravings of our bodies. So Satan has dominion now over us. We are born reflecting Satan more than we reflect God, though we don't lose the imago Dei, or the image of God, completely. Because when Noah is come off the ark, God says, look, if anyone sheds man's blood, then that man's blood is to be shed, because he has shed the blood of the image of God. So even after the fall, even after the flood, God still says that human beings bear the image. We are image bearers. However, we reflect Satan. So I do this with my kids all the time. When my kids lie, and they do frequently, and it's not just because they're pastors' kids. I know some of you are thinking, yeah, those pastors' kids, that's all they do. They just lie. Liars, all of them. Yes, but so are your kids. Okay? They're liars too. And all kids lie. And in fact, grown-up kids tend to lie too. And you know what happens when we lie? We reflect Satan. Because in John 8, we learn that he is the father of lies. And when he lies, he speaks his native language. And so when you lie, you speak Satan's language. Do you know what the language of God is? Well, Jesus said, I am the way, the truth. And so when we tell the truth, even when it hurts, even when it gets us in trouble, we reflect God. But yet, so many of us tend to reflect Satan more than we reflect God, because we deceive instead of tell the truth. And this is what happened to Adam and Eve. They began to reflect Satan. But God says, I will fix what you broke. And you know this verse, Genesis 3:15. God is pronouncing curses on the woman, the man, and the snake. And in 3:15, this is the promise that I am going to fix what you broke, Adam. I will put enmity between you as the serpent, and the woman. And between your offspring, you could translate that seed. That's important. Seed. Your seed and her offsprings. He shall bruise your head, this seed, and you shall bruise his heel. Now, this is the first promise after Adam and Eve give up the kingship, the rulership, the subdueship, if you will. This is the promise that God is going to restore what we lost. And he's going to send one who will restore the authority back to God and then ultimately to us. Now, some of you are thinking right now, well, wait a minute. So you're saying that there is this kind of epic battle between God and Satan, and right now Satan has the upper hand, but in this part of the story, God's kind of helpless? No, it's not like that. God rules even over Satan. Satan is God's Satan. And if that troubles you, you just need to think logically for a second. If God is the source of all life and being itself, then nothing can exist without him upholding it, which is what Colossians 1 says. All things visible and invisible are held together by God himself, by Jesus Christ. And so, therefore, Satan could not even exist, nor his demons, if God was not upholding their very being. Do you see that? And so Satan couldn't even have this, if you will, sleight of hand dominion that he got from Adam and Eve if God didn't allow him to and sustain him in that. And it's because God has an ultimate plan. This is the plan. He is going to bruise the head or crush the head of Satan ultimately, proving like, hey, you want to play chess? You can play, but I'm going to win. I will win because I am the master chess player. So this is often called the first gospel. And so this is the first promise that the dominion that we lost in our first parents will be restored, regained, redeemed. All right, so now what I'm going to do for you is very quickly, and I'm going to talk fast, I'm going to do a jet tour through Genesis redemptive history. Okay, listen carefully, listen quickly. From here, what is promised is there is going to be a seed, if you will, an offspring. Do you see it? And there's going to be this line of offspring from Adam and Eve that will eventually bring a redeemer, one who will take back dominion. And if you read Genesis with this lens, you can see it because Adam and Eve have two kids. One reflects Satan. We learn in Hebrews that he certainly did, and in 1 John he certainly did. And one reflects God. We have Abel and Cain. And so you know the story. Cain kills Abel, but there's another child. What's his name? Starts with an S. Seth. And then, if you read the story, 5 through 9, Genesis 5 through 9, Seth's line is traced. This seed of promise. The promise will be fulfilled through Seth, not Abel, because Abel was killed by a satanic figure. And when you read the line of Cain, when he goes off, all kinds of wickedness comes from Cain, the line of Satan, if you will. So you have the seed of the snake and the seed of the woman in Seth and in Cain. You just follow the Bible that way. And then what happens in Seth's line is a man comes called Noah. Noah, one of Seth's descendants. And Noah found favor in God's sight. In other words, Noah got grace from God. And though Noah was himself a sinner, God said, I'm going to save you, and I'm going to save your wife, your 3 kids, and their wives. 8 people in total. And so you know the story. God floods and kills everyone on the entire earth with water. Water judgment. It's a terrible thing that happens to the wicked. Because we learn that all the imaginations of the heart at this time of people was only evil continually. And God said, I'm displeased that I made man. I'm going to wipe them all out. But Noah survives, and his 3 sons and their wives, and Noah's wife survives. And when they come off of the ark, they begin to repopulate. Then what happens is the table of nations and the Tower of Babel happens from Noah's line going into Genesis 10 and 11. Okay, and you can read that for yourselves. Genesis 12, from Noah's line comes Abraham. And Abraham is from Ur of the Chaldeans, modern day Iraq. And Abraham is told, out of you I am going to bless all the nations. And from you kings and nations will come, Abraham. And through you there will be born this seed of the woman. This seed of the woman, this promised seed from Genesis 3:15. And you remember the story, right? Abraham has Isaac, Isaac has Jacob, Jacob has 12 sons, the 12 sons become the 12 tribes of Israel. One of those sons' name is Judah. And as Jacob is dying, he's prophesying over his sons. And in Genesis 49:10, he prophesies over Judah. And within this prophecy, we read this: the scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff, ruler, scepter, from between his feet, until tribute comes to him, and to him shall be obedience of the peoples. This is a prophecy that through Judah, the rulership, the dominion, will be realized. And then we learn that Jesus is the Lion from the tribe of Judah. And so through Judah's children, you can trace this genealogy out in the book of Matthew chapter 1. We don't have time to do it, but you can just watch how God uses imperfect people to trace the line to Jesus, the King. Now, this points to, right here, a ruler or a scepter means a king's staff by which he judges and rules. And so now this is the first declaration that through Judah, kings are going to come. And we know what happens here, okay? So we're gonna run through some Old Testament prophecy quickly and some Psalms. Isaiah 11, 1-5, traditional Christmas text. However, I want you to look at it through the lens of this kingship. Look, there shall come forth a shoot from the stump of Jesse. And so this is a picture of a cut down tree. You have this stump and a shoot, a little branch, a little leaf pops out of the stump. And who's Jesse? Well, Jesse is the father of David, King David, and his brothers. And guess who Jesse is in the line of? Judah. He's a Judahite, if you will. And so this prophecy here says that there shall come forth a shoot from the stump of Jesse, and a branch from his roots shall bear fruit. And the Spirit, see the capital S there? The Spirit of the Lord shall rest upon him. The Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and of might, the Spirit of knowledge and of the fear of the Lord. And his delight, this one, his delight shall be in the fear of the Lord. He shall not judge by what his eyes see or decide disputes by what his ears hear. And by the way, that's what ancient kings did. They heard disputes and they made judgments. You remember the story of Solomon and the two prostitutes. You guys remember that? Who doesn't remember that story? Be honest. Okay, so I don't have to rehearse it. You all remember. Solomon is taking cases like a judge, and he's making decisions as a ruler. That's the picture here. Jesus is not going to judge by what his eyes see or decide disputes by what his ears hear, but with righteousness he shall judge the poor. Righteousness, okay? And decide with equity for the meek of the earth. And he shall strike the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips he shall kill the wicked. Righteousness shall be the belt of his waist, and faithfulness the belt of his loins. That verse 5 there pointing to Ephesians 6, the armor of God. But in verse 4, we get this idea that he is going to have powerful words, and he's going to slay enemies with his words. Okay? Look at it. He will strike the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with his breath of his lips he shall kill the wicked. And this is a picture of a king going out to battle his enemies, and he's just going to use his mouth. And is anyone thinking of the prophecy of Jesus in Revelation 19? A sword coming out of his mouth by which he will fulfill this, strike down the nations. So here's the point of this text here, this Christmas text. You have Jesse, who is David's father, who is a Judahite, and the prophecy is one's going to come from Jesse's greater son David, who is going to rule and reign and judge with equity and justice and fairness. 2 Samuel 7, 12-16. Now this is a promise directly to David. This is a very important text if you're not familiar with it. This text is given right to David, and he says, when your days are fulfilled, David, the shoot that came up from the stump, David, and then beyond it as the shoot grows into branches and trees, when your days are fulfilled and you lie down with your fathers, that means die, I will raise up your offspring after you, who shall come from your body, David, your own children, and I will establish his kingdom. He shall build a house for my name. Now we know verse 13 and 12 is talking about Solomon, because Solomon built the temple, and it was a magnificent, glorious temple, one of the ancient wonders of the ancient world. Verse 14, I will be to him a father, and he shall be to me a son. When he commits iniquity, still talking about Solomon, I will discipline him with the rod of men, with the stripes of the sons of men. But my steadfast love will not depart from him, as I took it from Saul, whom I put away from before you. Now you remember Saul was not from the tribe of Judah. He was not. So Saul was a king, but he was a king who was not in the line of the great kings. He was not one of the promised ones of Judah from Genesis 49. Whom I put away from before you, and your house, now listen to 16 here, and your house and your kingdom shall be made sure forever before me. Now where's that foreverness going to come from? Solomon died. and your throne shall be established forever. Now we know that this isn't talking about the physical descendants of David, because there were others who got onto the throne. And so this must be talking about one who would come in the line of David, if you will, from the bloodline of Judah, who would rule forever, whose kingdom would be established and it would not end. Now look at Psalm 32, 11 to 12, and then same Psalm, verses 17 to 18. The promise is rehearsed. The Lord swore to David a sure oath from which he will not turn back. One of the sons of your body I will set on your throne. If your sons keep my covenant and my testimonies that I shall teach them, their sons also forever shall sit on your throne. Well, his sons definitely violated verse 12. They did not keep his covenant. They did not keep his testimonies. In fact, you know the story of Solomon. He had 700 wives who were princesses and 300 concubines. You know what they were for, right? And so those 700 wives led him away from the Lord, and he began to worship other gods. So you have David, a man after God's own heart. The very next one on the throne fails miserably, even though he built the temple and even though he was the wisest man outside of Jesus ever to live. Epic failure. There I will make a horn. Now, you know, Old Testament language and New Testament apocalyptic literature, horns mean what? Yell it out. Strength. Strength. Horns mean power and strength. You think of the ancient herding animals like rams. You know, rams, they have those like twisted horns. And what do they do with them? They charge and they smash their horns into one another and they fight. You think about a rhinoceros with that giant horn coming up. What does he do with it? It's his strength. He fights. He gouges with this horn. And even deer, you know, like the bigger the antlers, the greater the hunter boasts. Because with the bigger horns come more strength, more power, a bigger deer. So the idea here is this horn is going to sprout for David. There's going to become this powerful one from David. I have prepared a lamp for my anointed. Okay, so now we have anointing in the picture. Did you know that Jesus' last name, Christ, is not actually his last name? It comes from Messiah, and what the word Messiah means is anointed one. Anointed one. Jesus, the anointed one. And the kings were always anointed with oil, as were the priests. The anointing was to show that this one has been set apart and chosen by God. And you remember when David was chosen by Samuel, he pours the anointing oil on him, and the Holy Spirit rushes upon him and remains on him. Very similar to how the Holy Spirit rushed upon Jesus at his baptism and remained on him, and then he went out and was tempted by Satan 40 days and 40 nights in the wilderness. I have prepared a lamp for my anointed. His enemies I will clothe with shame, but on him his crown will shine. What do kings wear? Crowns. And so the idea is this powerful anointed ruler is going to shine even in the face of his enemies. And we know how this happened because when Jesus rose from the dead, he was vindicated and his enemies were all put to open shame. Even the invisible enemies, Colossians 1 says, or Colossians says, put to shame by his death on the cross. Here's another classic Christmas text. Look at it in light of the kingship. For unto us a child is born, 700 years before Jesus came, by the way. To us a son is given. The government shall be upon his shoulders, and his name shall be Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Talk about rulership, verse 7. Of the increase of his government and peace there will be no end. On the throne of David and over his kingdom, to establish it and to uphold it with justice and with righteousness from this time forth when it's fulfilled and forevermore. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will do this. The Lord of hosts meaning the one who rules the armies of heaven. God's going to accomplish this. And we know that he did. He did through Jesus. Now, let's look at this actually happening in what we call the Christmas story. Luke 1, 26 to 27, and then verses 31 to 33. In the 6th month, the angel Gabriel was sent from God to a city of Galilee named Nazareth, to a virgin betrothed, that is legally pledged to be married, to a man whose name was Joseph, and of the house of who? David. Now that is really important. When you trace the genealogy in Matthew and in Luke, what you will see is it goes from David to Jesus, from Judah to David to Jesus. And there's a ton of names in between there that we don't have time to go through. Trace the genealogy for yourself. There's a reason that genealogy is in there in the beginning of Matthew and Luke. It's trying to show you that there's a fulfillment taking place here of what God promised way back in book 1, 49. To a virgin betrothed, to a man whose name was Joseph of the house of David, and the virgin's name was Mary. Now verse 31. And behold, you will conceive in your womb and bear a son, and you shall call his name Jesus. He will be great and will be called the Son of the Most High. And the Lord God will give to him the throne of his father David. And he will reign. What Adam and Eve were supposed to do? He will reign over the house of Jacob, that means Israel, the Jewish people, forever. Forever. And of his kingdom, say it, there will be no end. And so this is the fulfillment of all that we've just read. And we know this as the Christmas story. Yet God was up to something throughout all of that history. And trust me, we skipped a lot. We only have so much time in one sermon. There's much, much more that could have been said. Now, 1 John 3:8 is so crucial to what God is up to that you don't realize. Look at this. 1 John 3:8 says this, whoever makes a practice of sinning is of the devil, for the devil has been sinning from the beginning. The reason the Son of God appeared, that's an important statement right there. Wait, why did the Son of God appear? The reason the Son of God appeared was to destroy the works of the devil, all the way back to Genesis chapter 3, friends. It was to take back the dominion and the rulership that we handed over to Satan. That's why the Son of God appeared. And in addition to that, how would he do this? He would do this by losing. He won by losing. He gained ultimate power by giving up all power, even the very shirt off his back. It's unbelievable. And so what is Jesus doing? He is coming to destroy the works of the devil, all of his works, but specifically the way in which the serpent deceived our first parents and took the dominion from us. God in Jesus has come back to restore the dominion, friends, the rulership, the kingship. Look at Mark 15. And so this is a perfect transition from last week and the end of the Gospel of Mark into this sermon. Pilate asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Asking Jesus. And he answered him, "You have said so." And remember, what we said was, that's a weird way to answer, but what he's saying is, yeah, I am the king, but not in the way you think of kings. I am the capital K king, Pilate. I rule over all the seen and unseen realms. You have no idea what my kingship is like. So it is as you said, you have said so. And they clothed him with a purple cloak, royalty, and they twisted together a crown of thorns, and they put it on him and began to salute him, "Hail, King of the Jews." This is satanically inspired. And remember what we said was, when Adam got his curse, the curse was, "Thorns and thistles the ground shall produce for you. From the sweat of your brow you shall eat all the days of your life. And from dust you were taken, to dust you shall return." That was the curse on Adam, but look at Jesus as the king bearing the literal curse, the crown of thorns, thorns and thistles. So rather than the crown of gold with jewels, he bears the curse. Why? To destroy the works of the devil. And here, right here, we see Genesis 3:15 fulfilling. It's the serpent bruising the seed's heel. Oh, you think you're a king? Take some thorns. Little did he know, the curse was literally being born in his body. He was bearing the curse symbolically by the thorns, and really they were sinking into his body. That's amazing. That's not an accident. We're not reading that into the text. And they began to salute him. Hail, King of the Jews. Meanwhile, this is a mockery, not knowing, not only is he the King of the Jews, he's the King of the angels and the demons and all people groups. And here they are mocking him. It's very ironic and dark, but it's what happened, and it's what had to happen. Now look at Revelation 19:11 and 16. This is Jesus coming back. So we're celebrating Advent starting tonight. Advent literally means the awaiting of the arrival of whatever. It could be the advent of the iPhone 12.2. You have to wait till December or September-ish for the 0.2 to come out. We're waiting for the advent of the new iPhone to come out. We're waiting, for Dane Ortland's next book to come out. His last one was so good. We're waiting for the advent of Dane Ortland's new book. Well, in this sense, the advent is the coming of Jesus Christ. And he has come the first time. So what's Advent about now? Now Advent is about this. His second coming. We are waiting for the second coming of Jesus Christ. And when he comes back, friends, game over. And game restart. Game over for sin and death. Game over for destruction and chaos. Game over for the opposite of 1 Corinthians 13. Love doesn't envy, it doesn't boast, it's not easily angered, it doesn't keep a record of wrong. The end of that. And the reverse. Then I saw heaven open, and behold, a white horse. No longer a donkey, no longer an unread colt coming in on Palm Sunday. No, now it's a war horse. I saw heaven open, and behold, a white horse, and one sitting on it is called Faithful and True. And in righteousness he judges. Remember all the text about judging earlier? Rightly and with equity, and not by what he sees and not by what he hears. In righteousness he judges and makes war. Jesus is a warrior. So make no mistake about it. The first time he came as a nonviolent, peacemaking, self-sacrificing lamb, and he was slain by evil and darkness. Friends, he is resurrected, and he is now the King of Kings with all power and with all glory. And when he comes back a second time, though you might not like this picture of him, he's coming back as a warrior, and he's going to be stained with blood, the blood of his enemies. And as it's been said before, he's dressed all in white, and he's riding a white horse. The blood's going to really show up with a white background. And you might not like to think of Jesus like this, but you have a problem, and it's the same problem I have. And it's that we're a little too comfortable with sin. It lives in us. And we kind of like it. We're kind of attracted to it. We kind of use it to our advantage. And God is 100% holy, 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 separate from sin and sinners. And he hates sin with a passion that you and I cannot understand. We don't have a category for it. Why? Because Romans 7 says it lives in us. The disease is in our bodies, and it will not leave even if you get the vaccine. However, one day, the promise is, it will leave you. It will leave you. How? You have to die. Twice. The first time, you have to die to your sin and yourself, and you have to bow the knee and say, Jesus, forgive me for my sin. You have to confess that you are in trouble before God. You have to confess that you are not righteous and that you are indeed deserving his judgment. But he is so merciful and so gracious that if you ask him for forgiveness and mercy, He will apply what Jesus went through, bearing the curse of thorns and then bearing the curse on the tree. Cursed is everyone who is hung on a tree. He will apply that curse bearing for you, and it will be your curse that he bore in his body on the tree. And then you do have to die a second time. But friends, the death that we so fear in this life will usher us into eternal glory. No more suffering, no more pain, no more depression, no more medical bills and co-pays and dentist drills and fighting with your spouse and kids and arguing with your neighbors and that dog that keeps barking across the street at 2 a.m. No more. No more freezing cold winters in Pittsburgh. And if there is such a thing as sub-zero weather in the new heaven and new earth, we'll be adequately equipped for it and we'll enjoy it. It won't be deadly to us in the way that it is now. And so here, Jesus is coming and he's making war. And friends, here's what you need to know, and I say this lovingly, but I say that if you don't bow the knee now and lovingly submit, then the war will be against you. That's a promise. We don't want the Lord of war coming against us. Right? No, we want to be rather behind him and he in front of us on the horse, and we are a part of his army coming to make war with him, though he doesn't need us. On his robe and on his thigh, he has a name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. This is the king over every king. This is the Lord over every lord. Though rulers of the earth think they are ultimate, and though the devils who rule over the rulers of the earth and through the rulers of the earth think they're ultimate, friends, when the king comes, they will all bow. This is our king, friends. And this king is willing to make peace with you through his own death, his own suffering, his own loss. He gave it up so that you could gain, so that I could gain. He took the punishment in our place. 2 more quick texts and we're done. 2 Timothy 2:11-12 says this. This is Paul to his son in the faith, Timothy. This saying is trustworthy. If we've died with him, remember I said you have to die twice? He's referring to the first death. If we die with him, we will also live with him, second death. If we endure through this life and don't give up on him, we don't abandon the faith as so many of our friends have, at least mine have, what will happen? Read the end of verse 12 with me. We will also what? Reign with him. Restored dominion, friends. Restored rulership to you and to me. One last text to show this, and there could be many, but one last one. It's the parable of the talents. Jesus is picturing himself as a landowner, and he gives certain responsibilities to certain servants, and the servants are supposed to invest the money and make a return. And look what happens to the two. He said to him, one of the servants, "Well done, good servant. Because you have been faithful in very little, you shall have authority over" what? 10 cities. I mean, maybe like Pittsburgh, Chicago, Detroit, Miami, Los Angeles. Can I have Los Angeles? I'll take Honolulu. How about that? And the second came, saying, "Lord, your mina has made 5 minas." Double. The first one had 10, doubled it. Second one had 5, doubled it. And he said to him, "You are to be over 5 cities." Now, this is a parable, but I think it points to a reality that's coming for us. We are literally, as we just read in 2 Timothy, we are going to rule and reign with him. And it's going to look like you and I having dominion like Adam and Eve should have had, but then in a greater sense, we will be the government. Redeemed, restored, wise, loving, gracious, compassionate, equitable. And the government will not be like hearing, court cases in family court now. No, it will be more like causing the creation to flourish like we can't imagine. You think the tech's amazing now. You just wait. There's an entire universe out there to explore. And I think that's only part of what we'll be doing for the rest of eternity. Now we're going to close here. Much more could be said. Much more could be said. But we're going to celebrate that God fulfilled his promise in Genesis 3:15. That the seed of the woman will bruise the head of the snake or crush the snake's head. And this is what happened at the cross. The bruise was the cross. Satan entered Judas, had Judas betray him. Satan was behind the chief priests and the elders stirring up the crowds. Satan was inspiring the Romans to flog Jesus and to nail him to the cross. And yet it was for us. The King of Kings bore the curse so that you and I wouldn't have to. And the curse he bore gives us opportunity to be restored, to once again rule and reign with him. This is what we're celebrating. And so the juice represents the blood of Jesus. The cracker represents his body broken. And friends, we look forward to the day when we will realize this rulership again, when we will reign with him once again. So we're going to do it just a little bit different. We're going to take communion first, then we're going to close with a song, and we're going to sing, O come, Emmanuel. What a fitting song to close with, because Advent means awaiting the arrival of. So we'll rehearse the first Advent, but then at the last of the verses, we're going to say we're awaiting the second coming of the King. We're awaiting. So you can stand up. And we're going to, right now, together as a church, celebrate that the King bore the curse for us. He bore the curse in his body on the tree. And so when we take this cracker here, it represents Jesus' body. And Jesus said at the Last Supper, "This is my body broken for you." And he said, "Do this in remembrance of me." Whenever we eat this bread and drink this cup, we proclaim the King's death, the Lord's death, until he comes. So let's together be thankful and worship as we celebrate the blood of the King spilled to restore what we had lost through our first parents. So let's remember Jesus' body broken and blood shed for us. Father, together we are so grateful for the consistency of your word. Father, how tight it is. One author, 66 books, and yet it's telling one great story of your redeeming humanity, restoring what was once lost by our own doing through our first parents. Father, we thank you that you did not leave us in our mess. No, you stepped in and you made a promise. The promise was that you would send one, a seed of the woman, who would bruise the serpent's head, who would crush the serpent's head, who would destroy the works of the devil. We thank you that though this is not full and completed, we look forward with anticipation for the full fulfillment of this promise, where Satan and sin and death will be banished forever. We can't wait. We long for that day. And Father, until then, we say, come, Lord Jesus, come. So at this time, we're gonna sing. You have to be patient with me for